On Friday, May 27, 2011, Madison, or Maddy Scott, went to a birthday party at Hogsback Lake near Vanderhoof, British Columbia, Canada, with Geordie Bulldog, an old school friend she'd recently connected with. Maddy drove her and Geordie to the lake in her white 1990 Ford F-150 pickup truck, and the plan was to camp there in Maddy's tent. Geordie says that night the party turned into a big party because it was announced on Facebook. Around 50 people attended, mostly people between the ages of 18 and 25 years old. Reportedly, Maddy got into her tent for the night around 10 p.m., which really wasn't very long after she'd put it up, actually. Allegedly, around this time, she texted her parents to tell them her crush had told her he just wanted to be friends. Her parents say she was upset, but nothing drastic. Probably not in the mood to party anymore, Maddy just stayed in her tent. She didn't try to leave the campground, though. Who knows why? Her friend Geordie says she didn't want to leave her stuff behind. She had bought a cooler with her that had a 6-pack of beer and a bottle of wine, and unopened cans and some wine were later found, so I don't think that Maddy drank very much that night. Actually, Geordie would say that Maddy was probably the most sober person there. Around midnight, a small group of unknown people from out of town arrived at the party. A fight broke out and Geordie was accidentally pushed into the campfire, hurting her leg. Witnesses say Maddy stayed in her tent during this. She didn't even come out. At 12:30 a.m., Maddy received her last call, which was from a young man who was known to her family. Drunk and injured, Geordie wanted to leave with a guy that she'd started dating that night. Maddy begged Geordie allegedly to stay, but Geordie really wanted to leave. Geordie says she asked Maddy to go with her, but she wouldn't. She was already in her sleeping bag and wanted to stay with her stuff. Quote, she wanted to stay there with her tent for it to be safe. She thought it would be fine. Geordie left in her boyfriend's vehicle, leaving Maddy behind. When Geordie left, she says there were still 5 people there and a few of them were supposed to camp there for the night. So I don't think Maddy realized that she was going to be completely alone. But between 1:30 and 3 a.m., some reports say 4 a.m., all the other people that were at the campsite left. Reports say that some people leaving the party asked Maddy if she needed a ride, but she declined, leaving her all alone in her tent by the lake in the dark night. I don't know, but I can't really quite imagine that a young 20-year-old woman would feel safe in the pitch-black night alone in a tent, surrounded by all sorts of wildlife. It's definitely not something that I would have done, but maybe Maddy wasn't scared to be alone. Maybe she didn't even realize that she was alone. For all we know, she fell asleep and woke up alone. But reportedly, the last people at the site other than Maddy were the party host and his girlfriend. Around 2:30 a.m., they got into a disagreement and decided that they no longer wanted to camp. They claimed that they offered Maddy a lift, but she turned it down. And it's unclear whether Maddy knew, like I said at this point, that she was the last one at the party and that she was being left alone at the campsite. Her mother says there's no way she would have stayed if she knew she'd be totally alone. Maddy's phone allegedly continued to connect to the same local cell tower until 8 a.m. when the battery died or the phone was switched off manually. Geordie returned to the campsite around 8:30 a.m. Saturday morning with her new boyfriend to get her stuff that she had left behind the night before she had to go to work that Saturday. She says she found Maddy's tent partially collapsed and unzipped. Her sleeping bag was pushed to one side and her rings were scattered on the ground. Apparently, these were rings that she wore all the time, and Madison's truck was locked. Geordie thought this was all weird, but she really wasn't suspicious. She didn't try to contact Maddy or report what she had found. The party host also noticed Maddy's tent when he returned to clean up around 10:30 a.m. Since Maddy's truck was still there, he thought she might be inside sleeping. The last known actual sighting of Maddy Scott was around 3 a.m. Friday night. Some reports say 4 a.m., but generally most people say 3 a.m. So whatever happened to Maddy Scott happened sometime between 3 to 4 a.m. and 8:30 a.m. Saturday morning when Geordie came back to get her stuff. Now, back at home by Saturday night, Maddy's parents were starting to get worried. They had tried to reach her throughout the day and some of her friends to see if they had seen her. They weren't really in panic mode yet because, well, Maddy was 20. Even though it wasn't like her to be out of touch like this, all the same, cell reception at the lake really wasn't that great. But by the next day, Sunday, when they still hadn't heard from her, her mom reached out to Geordie's parents, who told her that Geordie had been home since the day before, and then her mom knew that something was really wrong. So her parents headed to the campsite where they found her tent completely flattened by this point, her locked truck with her purse in it and her belongings. The only two things missing from her campsite besides Maddy were her keys and her iPhone. Her family called the Vanderhoof RCMP to report Maddy missing approximately 12:30 p.m. on Sunday, May 30th, 2011. Police took Maddy's missing persons report very seriously and started a very extensive search for her right away. But by that Tuesday, with no sign of Maddy, the police came to the conclusion that she must have left the area in a vehicle and called off the search. Most, if not all, of the partygoers have since been polygraphed and reportedly cleared, and none have been named as a suspect or arrested. Actually, police have not named anybody as a suspect or any persons of interest. Maddy's family has offered a $100,000 reward for information resulting in arrests related to her disappearance, and I would say that Maddy's story has been very high profile. Despite all of this, there have never been any signs of Maddy until one day after the 12th anniversary of her disappearance on May 29, 2023, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP, announced that the remains of Maddy Scott had been identified after being found earlier that month at a rural property on the east side of Vanderhoof, BC. And this rural property was about 16 kilometers from where she went missing. This, of course, was a major breakthrough. Still no answers have come to this day, but the RCMP say the investigation continues. Welcome back to Unjust Crimes. My name is Michelle, and this is the disappearance of Maddy Scott. Madison, or Maddy Geraldine Scott, was born on April 29, 1991. She was born to Eldon and Don Scott, and she had two siblings, Ben and Georgia. She was known as a social, fun-loving, spontaneous girl who her brother described as someone who was as comfortable in a dress as she was in work coveralls changing the oil in a vehicle. She enjoyed dirt biking, figure skating, horseback riding, team sports like hockey and baseball, and hanging out with her friends. She was working as an apprenticed heavy-duty mechanic in the logging industry with her father, Eldon. She had spent most of her life in Vanderhoof, BC, Canada, where she graduated from the Chaco Valley Secondary School in 2009. Now, Vanderhoof is a small community surrounded by dense forest in the heart of the Canadian province of British Columbia. In 2011, Vanderhoof had a population of around 4,000 people and around 10,000 in the surrounding areas. If you watched my video on serial killer Cody Lejobokoff, he was also from Vanderhoof. There's been some suggestions that he may have been involved in Madison's case, but that's not possible because he was already in custody by the time that Maddy disappeared. So Maddy Scott was 5 feet 4 inches tall, and she weighed around 165 to 170 pounds. She had natural red hair and green eyes. She had a nose piercing and numerous ear piercings. She also had a tattoo of a bird on the inside of her left wrist. She had a passion for photography. She focused her camera on birds, flowers, friends, and especially her younger sister. So the night that Maddy vanished, she was supposed to hang out with her cousin, but canceled earlier that day saying that she was going to a birthday party. Sorry. Now, several reports I have read say that her crush was supposed to be at this birthday party at Hogsback Lake that night. A lot of reports say that the girl she went with, Jordy, was her best friend, but I don't think that is the case. From what I've read, the two had been friends in school, but lost touch over the years, but had recently reconnected, and this was the first time that they were going camping together. So as the story goes, the two girls went to the campsite in Maddy's Ford F-150. When they got there, they realized that Maddy had forgot her tent poles, so the two drove back to Maddy's house, her parents' home in Vanderhoof. They got the poles, she had a brief conversation with her mother Dawn, and the two girls set off on their way again. And this was around 9:30 p.m. The girls got back to the site, set up the tent, and went off to gather some firewood, and when they got back to their site, people had started to arrive and the party began. Now, reportedly, Maddy's crush had told her that he just wanted to be friends, and assuming here she was upset, she went to her tent around 10 p.m. So pretty much right away, actually. Reportedly, Jordy started dating a guy that was there at that party that night. By midnight, allegedly some people from out of town arrived and a fight broke out and Jordy was pushed into the campfire, hurting her leg. drunk and hurt, she wanted to go home. Maddy begged her to stay, allegedly, but Jordy was going. She asked Maddy to come with her, but Maddy didn't want to. She was already in her sleeping bag and didn't want to leave all her stuff behind, and this was around 1 a.m. It is unclear if Maddy realized at this point that she was going to be alone at the lake overnight. Her mother says that she would not have stayed if she knew she would be alone. Now, other people were supposed to be camping there too, and when Jordy left, she said there were still 5 people there. But for whatever reason, these other people all decided that they wanted to go home too. Now, reportedly, some asked Maddy if she needed a ride, but she declined. Still, it is unclear if she realized that she was being left alone in the complete blackness in the wilderness of BC. Definitely not somewhere that I would want to be. Think about the cougars and grizzly bears. No thank you. Okay, a lot has been said about Jordy leaving Maddy behind. And yeah, I get it. It's not something that you should ever do. But it doesn't mean that she did anything to Maddy. Though she had gotten a lot of heat for this. She said herself that she was questioned by police every day for 3 months. I mean, she had to be a suspect. But she was eventually cleared. Personally, I think she was young, drunk, and not thinking clearly. Probably a little bit selfish too. Why she didn't report Maddy not being there the next morning or call her parents or other friends, I don't know. But I really doubt the first thing that Jordy thought when she seen Maddy's tent open was that Maddy was abducted and murdered. So that's not the only thing about this story that's a little off. But the Saturday night, so the night after Maddy had gone missing, an even bigger party of about 150 people were at that lake. Now, witnesses reported seeing Maddy's tent there, but nobody saw her. I have to wonder, did nobody think this was weird? In such a small community, I'm sure there were people there that knew this was Maddy's truck and that was Maddy's tent. Apparently a lot of people from the second party as well as the Friday night party have been polygraphed and allegedly they have been cleared. None of them have been named as a suspect or arrested. I don't know. It's possible, though, that police do have suspects from one of the parties, but don't have enough information to proceed with charges. I really have no idea, but I have seen in a couple of reports that the partygoers have been cleared. But still, I would imagine that someone at one of those parties knows something, even if they don't know that they know it, or that it's important. My gut tells me that someone from Friday night knew she was there alone and went back after everyone left. But I don't know that. It's just as possible that someone was watching the party from afar and waited until she was alone, as it is just as possible that someone randomly stumbled upon her. So, by the Saturday night, the day after the party, her parents thought it was strange that they hadn't heard from her. But they weren't really panicked yet. I mean, Maddy was 20, she was independent, and cell reception really wasn't that great at the lake. Though strange, they tried to push it off, but by the next day, almost 2 full days of not hearing from her, which was totally out of character, they were worried. Her mom reached out to Jordy and her parents and realized that Jordy had come home that Friday night. And that's when she said, okay, enough is enough, I need to go see what's going on. And when her parents went to the campsite, they found her Ford F-150 truck parked in a grassy clearing and her tent that was actually collapsed by this point. So Maddy had bought a cooler with her with a 6-pack of beer and a bottle of wine. Now, unopened cans and some wine were recovered by police later, so Maddy didn't really drink very much, and Jordy did say that she was sober. She had talked to an unidentified young man who was known to her family at 12:30 a.m. I don't believe this call holds any significance to the case other than noting that this was the last activity on her phone. Now, this is something I do find very interesting. Her father said that when he and her mother went to the lake Sunday, there were people that were camping nearby. Apparently Dawn, Maddy's mother, went and talked to them, and it turned out that they were friends of Maddy's. They hadn't seen her, and the truck had been there the whole time. I'm assuming here that these people set up camp on Saturday because Maddy was said to be alone the Friday night. I have to wonder, why didn't these people think it was strange that her truck was there, her tent was there, all her belongings were there, but Maddy wasn't there? Her father searched the immediate area for a few minutes, then Dawn contacted the police. So both her mother and her father have both said that they don't think that Madison realized she was being left alone at the lake. Her father says Jordy didn't want to leave her and tried to get Maddy to leave, but she wouldn't go with her, and he thinks that she did this because she didn't realize that she was going to be there alone. So when Jordy came back the next morning to get her stuff, Madison's truck was still parked in the same spot that it had been the night before. Her tent was partially collapsed, the door to the tent was open, and her sleeping bag and belongings were pushed to either side of the tent. Apparently, Jordy had also seen Maddy's rings on the ground, By the following day, when her parents went to the lake to see what was going on, they found the same things, basically only that her tent was fully collapsed, and there were other people at the campground nearby. Her parents noted that her purse was in her truck, and the only things missing besides Maddy were her keys and her iPhone. She had been texting with her parents during the party on Friday night, but they could not reach her the next day, and at some point, her phone ended up dying and her tent was flattened. There were no signs of a struggle around Maddy's tent or truck area either. The search for Maddy started right away. Her steps were retraced throughout the day as she visited a liquor store and later bought snacks. She could be seen on security camera before heading to the party. In the early stages of the investigation, police thought Maddy was trapped or injured in the surrounding area because there was a big patchwork of gravel pits, creeks, swamps, forests, and fields. And Hogsback Lake was searched by divers and boats, including its small island. The surrounding area has also been searched by foot, quad, horseback, helicopter, cadaver dogs, cars, and trucks. Search crews walked in lines, hand in hand. The helicopters used infrared heat-sensing technology. The boat search included side-scanning sonar, and the area was grid-searched extensively, some areas 2 to 3 times. And it is worthwhile noting that the area is very rough terrain with a dense forest. Even the Canadian Rangers, a local detachment of the Army, joined in the effort. Within a day, 150 volunteers had shown up to help look for Maddy Scott. Her family and friends distributed information about her disappearance via billboards, signs, media, stickers on vehicles, you name it. They offered a reward of $100,000, and her family and friends put on an annual poker ride to raise awareness and continue the search. The poker runs were based out of the lake where she vanished, and volunteers and participants got together on horseback, ATV, and walked the Hogsback Lake area to further the search. On May 31st, 2011, 4 days after Maddy's disappearance, the RCMP suspended the search. However, volunteers kept looking. But the days and weeks and eventually years dragged on with no results. Volunteers continued to expand the search area, covering hundreds of miles. Calls even came in from psychics around the world, but still, there was no sign of Maddy Scott. Police arrived at the lake quickly, and immediately, like I said, the search for Maddy started. There was no signs of a struggle. Her tent, truck, and belongings had been left unattended over the weekend, but nothing was damaged or stolen. Police examined her sleeping bag and pillow, her purse, a camera, toiletries and jewelry, a hatchet, a cooler with wine and beer in it, a gas can with gasoline, and motorbike boots. They found nothing of interest. The only items missing were her keys and an iPhone with a robin egg blue case. Police presumed that Maddy had left voluntarily, taking these items with her, and there were no initial clues as to Madison's whereabouts. Police did not believe that she ran away because she had family that loved her and she had a great relationship with them. Detectives on the case said that they interviewed all party attendees, including most of even the 150 people that arrived for the party Saturday night, and many of them had been polygraphed. Jordy became a popular suspect in the media, but according to her, she passed multiple polygraphs and was cleared by the Scott's family private investigator. In addition, Maddy was seen alive after Jordy left in someone else's vehicle, which would mean that both Jordy and the guy that she had just started dating that night would have had to return to the campsite after 3 a.m. Nonetheless, common sense says that Jordy was a suspect because she was one of the last people to see Maddy. She says she was talked to every day, every single day, for 3 months, and she had 2 polygraphs, which she passed. Police had determined that she no longer was a suspect. And I have actually seen that police have cleared Jordy as being a suspect. I've seen reports saying that most everyone else seems to have been ruled out, including the party host and his girlfriend, Maddy's crush, the mystery 12:30 a.m. caller, a guy whose feelings for Maddy weren't reciprocated, and a murdered man that she was rumored to be acquainted with. But the RCMP have not really said much about this, which is the norm, so I don't want to say these people have been ruled out completely because it is possible that police have someone in these groups of people on their radar but do not have the missing pieces of evidence needed to proceed with charges. We simply do not know that. But the RCMP have stated, quote, "We haven't identified anyone that would have a grudge or had any reason to harm or cause Madison's disappearance." The RCMP have also publicly stated that they do believe that foul play was involved. So Maddy was acquainted with this guy named Fribian Bjornsson. He was 28, and apparently they had spent time together. I'm not sure if they were dating. Her family says they were not, but Jordy says that she was surprised to hear that Maddy was spending time with him because he was, well, bad news. Police say they investigated him, and he voluntarily took a lie detector test and passed. He wanted to clear his name, they said, and he wanted people to know that he had no involvement with Maddy's disappearance. So based on his lie detector test, he was allegedly cleared by police, but not long after this polygraph test, I read 2 days after, he disappeared himself, and I'm going to get more into that in a bit. But police said that there was no connection between the two incidents. So the area where Maddy vanished from is surrounded by some pretty dense forest, and is populated by a lot of wildlife. But there weren't any signs of bear or cougar tracks around her tent. It looked as if she'd simply walked off or gotten into another vehicle. Quote, "Something was obviously amiss," said RCMP Sergeant Rob Vermeulen. When North District Major Crime, the RCMP unit that handles the most serious cases in that part of the province, took charge of Maddy Scott's file, a dozen investigators poured into Vanderhoof and began working the case from a crime angle, doing forensics and interviewing potential witnesses, at the same time that the search was still ramping up. Quote, "Early in the investigation, police determined that it was out of character for Madison not to be in contact with her family and or friends," stated the BC RCMP Major Crimes Section Special Program Projects Unit. Madison's family have said that they have a great relationship with police, and the police have kept them in the loop as best as they can. Obviously, there are things that they cannot share with the family, and this is pretty much how the case stayed for 12 years. Then seemingly, out of the blue, one day after the 12th anniversary of her disappearance, on May 29, 2023, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police announced that the remains of Madison Scott had been identified after being found earlier that month at a rural property on the east side of Vanderhoof. The remains were found on a private farm located south of Vanderhoof, about 16 kilometers, or a 10 to 15 minute drive from where Maddy had disappeared. Police secured the site with a search warrant, leading to speculation about potential involvement of the property's occupants. But the RCMP has remained tight-lipped, as usual, withholding details about the property owners, how the remains were found, or any evidence linking them to Madison's death. The cause of her death has not been publicly disclosed, and the RCMP has neither confirmed nor ruled out foul play. Investigators have indicated that solving this case remains a priority, and they have continued to appeal for information from the public. Now, police have not said when exactly Maddy's remains were found or how. They have not said whether the information leading to her discovery came from new information provided by the public. They say the possibility of foul play has not been ruled out, but no arrests have been made. In a statement released through the RCMP, the Scott family says that they are still hoping to get more information about what happened to their daughter. Quote, "While there is some relief that Maddy has been found, we are left with many questions that now has us motivated to find the answers to truly bring Maddy home. As a family, we now have the opportunity to allow Maddy to rest." Although further details of the discovery have not been publicized, Superintendent Sanjay Vijayakun, the lead of the BC RCMP Major Crimes, gave a general overview of how complex high-profile cases like Madison's progress after such a find. Quote, "Solving a historic case involves a very systematic review of existing evidence and information." And he noted that the spread of rumors and misinformation on social media make this very challenging. He also added that forensics will play a key role in moving the case forward. So how did the police know to search here to begin with? We don't know. Was it a tip from the public, or was it some type of investigation or analysis that finally came through? Maddy's mother Dawn has said, quote, "The stress and sadness it's caused is beyond belief, beyond imaginable." She told 48 Hours, quote, "It kills you every time you see her billboard. It's gut-wrenching to see all those posters. It's staggering. You can't believe that it's your child." Obviously, in the wake of Maddy's disappearance, her family has been devastated. I would imagine once her remains were discovered 12 years after she vanished, has only added to their anguish. until her remains were found, there was always the hope that she would return to them someday. Now the family has to deal with the grief of knowing that she's truly gone, never to return. In the early days, actually immediately after Madison Scott was reported missing, her family and friends launched an extensive campaign to raise awareness. They offered a $100,000 reward for information and have organized events like the annual poker ride for Maddy. Now these rides were based out of the Hogsback Lake, and people would ride horseback, ride ATVs, or walk the area to further search for Maddy, as well as raise awareness about her disappearance. Within a day of her disappearance, 150 volunteers from the community had shown up at Hogsback Lake to help search for Madison. Her parents had started their own investigation apart from the RCMP investigation. In their basement, they had poster boards of everyone that was at the party, when they had arrived, when they left, and with who. They retraced Maddy's steps, and they wanted to know why she was left there on her own. Why did everybody leave? I don't know if they ever got those answers that they were looking for, but I do know that there have been no updates since the announcement of the discovery of Maddy's remains. Her family had set up a website with photos and a timeline of her disappearance, but I couldn't actually find this website, so I assume since the discovery of Maddy's remains, her family has taken the website down. They have their reasons for this. I would imagine it wasn't an easy thing to maintain to begin with. I mean, I can see running this website would have been very emotionally draining. Throughout the years that Madison was missing, her family and friends never gave up on finding her and took every opportunity to raise awareness to help bring her home. In fact, the family had hosted a poker ride for Madison on May 27, 2023, and just 2 days later, 12 years and 1 day after she vanished, the RCMP announced that her remains had been located. Whether the timing means anything, I am not sure. I did read that her remains had been located earlier that month. Throughout the years that Maddy was missing, her case maintained a high profile, with billboards, posters all over town. Almost every vehicle in town had a sticker of Madison on it, all asking for tips about her disappearance, even in the neighboring communities, including Prince George. Her case got a lot of attention in the media, including an episode of 48 Hours, a documentary film that was produced by Scottish director Stephen F. Schooler. There were video blogs, a Crime Stoppers video about her disappearance, and numerous true crime YouTubers and podcasters that have covered Madison Scott's story. Her friend Jordy, the girl that she went to the party with, says people online accuse her of killing Maddy and say that she was there when it happened. But she says that the police have cleared her, and the police have said this as well. Jordy says that she feels horrible, she regrets everything, she should have stayed, and she says if she could go back in time, she would change it all and she would have stayed. So a weird thing happened a few months after Maddy disappeared, and I briefly mentioned it. A man named Fribbjørn, and I doubt very much I'm saying his name right, but Fribbjørn Bjornsson, who was an acquaintance of Madison's, vanished from Vanderhoof as well. Now he was last seen alive in January of 2012 at a 7-Eleven. His head was later found in a vacant house on a reserve near Fort St. James, but the rest of his body has never been found. Now, police released information stating that they believed he was beaten to death in the basement of a home by 20 people. What does this have to do with Maddy, you may wonder? So a few things. He was rumored to possibly be her boyfriend, though her family says this is not true, but they were allegedly spending time together. And he was also allegedly going around after Maddy disappeared saying that he knew what happened to her. But police have confirmed that he was polygraphed and cleared in Madison's disappearance. The strange thing is, apparently after this polygraph, just 2 days later, he vanished as well. Is this all coincidence? Maybe. Probably. But still worthwhile mentioning because we have no idea what happened to Madison. So as I said, Madison's parents have stated the two were not dating, that they were on the same baseball team and hung out around some of the same people. However, some people believe that Maddy just didn't share this information with her parents because Fribbjørn, he was around 8 years older and not the kind of man that her parents probably would have wanted her to date. According to her friend Jordy, she was shocked to hear that they had been spending time together because he was, quote, bad news. Like, bad news. In fact, police believe Fribbjørn's death was related to his known involvement with drug dealers and other criminals, and they have said that they do not believe that his murder has anything to do with Madison Scott's disappearance. Quote, "This story has defined the last decade of Vanderhoof," says Chris Moshumansky, a search and rescue volunteer who helped lead the efforts to find Madison when she first disappeared. The family of Madison, or Maddy Scott, have released a statement in the wake of her remains being found. They said that their emotions they've experienced since learning of the shocking development can't be summarized, but they once again find themselves astonished by the widespread support of the community. Quote, "This support has been unwavering since day one, which we are forever grateful for, and truly believe that it is the reason why Maddy has been found. We trust that with patience, persistence, and belief that we will receive answers and remain motivated to achieve closure." And the family encouraged anyone with information to contact the RCMP. Since we virtually know nothing about what happened to Madison Scott, theories in this case abound. And let me tell you, there is a lot of information out there on Madison Scott's disappearance, and a lot of speculation. One theory that persists to today is that there was foul play by a party attendee. So in other words, someone from the party Friday night did something to Maddy. Police, though, have stated that they had interviewed all of the partygoers on the night of May 27, 2011, and reported that they had no reason to believe that a party attendee was responsible for Maddy's disappearance, and had not identified anyone who would have had a grudge against her or a reason to harm her. Police reported that these people cooperated with their requests for polygraph tests, but I also read reports that state that the police had polygraphed most of the partygoers, so I'm not entirely sure on that. But apparently these people have been cleared and the police do not feel anyone from the party hurt Maddy. Maybe that's all true, but I think this theory persists because, well, it makes sense. Who else would have known that Maddy was left alone at the campground that night? I know there could be others, like someone she told herself, or even someone another partygoer told, or who knows who. Someone could have said in passing to whoever after going home, "This girl is still up there all alone." I mean, we simply do not know. But it makes sense that this theory persists, that someone from the party that Friday night knew Maddy was there alone and either went back after everybody left, or maybe pretended to leave and hid out and waited for their chance to pounce. Then think about where her remains turned up, which were relatively close to the lake where she was camping, just a 10 to 15 minute drive away, which suggests that her killer may have had local knowledge of the area. Most of the partygoers were locals, except for a few who turned up from out of town around midnight. Another theory that persists is that Maddy was abducted and murdered by an unknown individual. Her truck and tent were found undisturbed except for the tent flap that was open, suggesting that she may have stepped out willingly or under coercion. The lack of physical evidence at the campsite, though, made it very difficult for investigators to determine what had happened, but after an extensive search, they did come to the conclusion that Madison had left the area by vehicle. With the use of a weapon, it probably would have been easy enough to get her to step outside of her tent and get into a waiting vehicle. With this theory again, her remains were found relatively close by, and this also suggests that the person may have had knowledge of the area. Another theory that persists is that Maddy's disappearance and murder are related to the Highway of Tears. For one, Vanderhoof is located near the Highway of Tears, which is a stretch of Highway 16 in BC that is infamous for numerous cases of missing and murdered women, many of whom were Indigenous. While Madison was not Indigenous, her disappearance shares certain characteristics with these cases, including the remote setting and lack of immediate witnesses. But still, her case is not classified as such because it does not fit their criteria. Now, she disappeared about 16 kilometers from the highway, so a 10 to 15 minute drive away, give or take. She also wasn't involved in anything considered high risk. I don't like that criteria though, because I know of at least another case of a white woman who vanished on Highway 16, and she too was not doing anything high risk. But she was included on the list of the Highway of Tears victims, and that is Shelley Ann Baksu, and I did cover her case a while back. Anyway, Maddy is not on EPANA's Highway of Tears list. For those not familiar, EPANA is a task force that was created by the RCMP to investigate murders on the Highway of Tears. but for those people living in the small communities along Highway 16, all of these tales of abduction and murder, I guess they just kind of start to run together. And I think this theory persists because of a few reasons. One, the location where she was murdered, which was close to the highway. Plus, the highway is infamous for all of the murders. Nobody knows what happened to Maddy, so yeah, it is conceivable. She wasn't indigenous, but so what? Not all of the victims on the Highway of Tears were indigenous. Serial offenders have operated in this area, taking advantage of the isolation and vulnerability of their victims, and I don't think you can get much more vulnerable and isolated than what Maddy Scott was the night that she disappeared after everyone else left her alone. And allegedly, investigators have not ruled out the possibility of a connection between Madison's case and other unsolved disappearances in the area. Another theory that has been floating around since her remains were found is that there was local involvement. She was found on a private property close to her last known location, and I have read rumblings of two brothers who are supposedly associated with this property. And these brothers supposedly may have been involved in Madison's death. Now, I take this with a huge grain of salt, though, because they're rumors. And rumors can really take on a life of their own and get really twisted, and they change from person to person. But I included it in theories because how can we not be suspicious of the property where she was found? And until police say there was no connection between those associated with the property and Maddy, and so far they have not said that. So this theory persists, and the property owner's relationship to Madison, if there was any, has not been disclosed. And the RCMP's use of a search warrant also suggests that they had specific reasons to believe that this property was significant to the case. Now, is that the way it went down? I don't know. Maybe someone found Madison's remains and then they got a search warrant for the property. We simply do not know. Another theory is that some kind of accident happened to Maddy and her body was concealed so that those involved could avoid being charged. But to me, the distance between the campsite and the location of her remains makes it unlikely that she wandered off alone and succumbed to an accident, unless of course her body was transported there after she had died. Then I think about the fact that she was hid pretty well. I mean, it took 12 years to find her. To me, that seems pretty deliberate and maybe not the actions of some drunk teenagers trying to cover something up. Unless, of course, it was one person. But again, there were no signs of a struggle or an accident. She would have had to leave the campsite. And of course, an accident could have happened once she left. There's so many could-haves with this theory. I guess it's possible, but I'm not convinced. I think whatever happened to her was deliberate, but I hope I'm wrong. In line with the accident theory, some have suggested that Maddy might have taken some drugs at the party and had a bad reaction. Now, there is no evidence that Maddy ever used drugs, but it's been heavily implied that they were present at this party. Some people have suggested that she took something, she didn't feel well, she went to her tent, and then died sometime between 1 and 3, causing a lot of people to flee the site in panic. And instead of calling 911, the remaining attendees presumably then conspired to get rid of her body and stage a disappearance. But that would mean that a group of teenagers would have to keep their story straight for over a decade. What are the chances that not one of them would have cracked or felt guilty in 12 years, or even passed polygraphs? Plus, that also means that multiple witness sightings would need to be outright lies. I just don't see it. Another theory that persists is the involvement of Fribbjørn Bjørnsen, the 28-year-old with a history of drug abuse that Maddy was friends with and that she may have been dating. Allegedly, after Maddy disappeared, he was going around telling people that he knew what happened to her. Police investigated his involvement, but police and the victims' families do not believe that there is any significant links between the two cases. Nonetheless, talk in town has persisted that he owed drug dealers money and that they had abducted Maddy to teach him a lesson. Another theory put forth in this case is that Madison Scott voluntarily disappeared and did something to herself. I don't think this theory holds much weight. She was close to her family. She had an active social life. She had no history of mental illness. Sure, spending the night in her tent while a party was going on can be seen as withdrawing or distress, but she was turned down by her crush, supposedly. She probably felt embarrassed and really didn't want to socialize anymore. Was she really that upset that she could do something to herself? Not only that, but how did her body end up where it did? She certainly didn't walk in the middle of the night through the dense forest. Plus, the police have publicly said that they do suspect foul play. There's some online chatter about two guys who attended the party. She was allegedly interested in one of them, but he wasn't interested in her. I assume this here would be her crush. And the other guy apparently was interested in Maddy, but she wasn't interested in him. Now, allegedly some interest was paid to these two guys by the police, but it doesn't seem that this theory has gone anywhere. Really, it's mostly just internet chatter, and plus supposedly most of the partygoers, if not all of them, have been cleared. I've mentioned that Jordy has faced a lot of backlash for leaving Maddy that night, even people who have accused her of murdering Maddy, but I have seen myself police say that she is cleared. So that is not a theory as far as I'm concerned. I think that Jordy was young, selfish, and she wanted to leave, and I really don't think that she realized that Maddy could be in danger. Plus, she was drunk, and people do stupid things when their inhibitions are down. Allegedly in town, some families find themselves treated as outcasts because their sons were at the party with Maddy and have come under suspicion. Rumors persist about human trafficking, as well as the involvement of local drug dealers. RCMP say no evidence of anything that would cause Maddy to leave the campsite on her own, such as a flat tire, for example, could be found. Rick Beatty from the Vanderhoof Search and Rescue said that, like the RCMP, many assisting the search came to the conclusion that Maddy must have left by vehicle because there was no evidence to indicate that she left by foot. I have covered numerous cases where the person seemingly vanishes without a trace. It seems inconceivable that that could happen to a person, but yet time and time again, it does. I don't believe for a second in any of these cases that nobody knows anything. I think there is always somebody out there that knows something. Even if they don't realize what they know is important, somebody always knows something. I just wish that people could find it in their hearts to come forward. The anguish and desperation the families of these individuals feel, it can't even be put into words. Maddy Scott went to a party with her friend and never came home again. She and her friend Jordy planned on camping at Hogsback Lake for the night, so they wouldn't have to drive home after drinking. Other people were supposed to camp there too. Jordy got drunk and hurt her leg and left Maddy behind. I know people have reported having asked Maddy if she needed a ride home, including Jordy, but she refused. But I wonder, did Madison even know that she was being left alone at the campground, surrounded by dangerous wildlife? I doubt it. Would she really have chosen to stay in her tent alone in the pitch black night surrounded by bears and cougars? Her family says she wouldn't have done that if she realized she was being left alone. So I really hate to shit on anybody, but what the fuck was Jordy thinking? How can you just leave your friend like that? Why didn't she just climb into the tent with Maddy like planned and sleep off her drunkenness? She wasn't that hurt, I'm sure. I know that's what me and my friends would have done, because that's what friends do. I can't imagine leaving a friend like that, I just can't. Especially in a tent at a campground, surrounded by bears and cougars. But I'll give Jordy the benefit of the doubt, though, because she thought other people were camping there that night too. But still. That being said, if she had been there, maybe there would have been 2 missing and murdered girls, so her selfishness probably saved her life. I would imagine that this will haunt Jordy for the rest of her life. A series of bad decisions. Not only Jordy's, but Madison's too. We cannot entirely blame Jordy for Madison being alone at the lake, because Madison could have left multiple times with multiple people. She chose to stay. Whether she knew she was alone, nobody knows. For over a decade, Maddy Scott's case gripped her community. The idea that someone from this little town that people say has always been such a wonderful place to live might be keeping a dark secret haunts locals. How can somebody just disappear like that from a group of people that she knew? Somebody knows, and why aren't they saying something? Now that her remains have been recovered, the task before investigators is determining her cause of death. Was she murdered? And if so, is there enough evidence to identify and apprehend the perpetrator? Police probably do know by now how Maddy died, and they probably do know that it was murder, because I feel like just about 2 years in, if it would have been suicide, we probably would have heard that by now. And I do think that the RCMP probably do have someone on their radar, but don't have the information they need to proceed. But we do not know that. But I do believe that we will eventually find out what happened to Madison Scott. All the RCMP have said is that, quote, investigators appreciate the public's interest in this case and hope to provide further details in the future. However, no further information can be released at this time in order to maintain the integrity of the investigation. They also say that they are still looking for additional information about the case. For investigators, says the RCMP's Rob Vermeulen, quote, it's frustrating anytime you know there's information out there that could help but hasn't gotten to you yet. We continue to appeal to people who, for whatever reason, haven't passed on that information to please get that to us. Anybody with any information about Madison Scott is encouraged to call the police's tip line at 778-290-5291 or 877-543-4822. Thank you for all the support. It truly is appreciated. It still surprises me that anybody would want to support unjust crimes. But for anybody that would like to do that and help support the podcast, I have added a PayPal link to my YouTube page. And again, it is truly appreciated. These stories do take a lot of time to put together. You can follow Unjust Crimes on Facebook and Instagram, and I will put those links in the description to this video. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, thank you for your time and stay safe out there.